Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. Thanks everyone for being a part of College Knowledge, powered by Elite Collegiate Planning. Just as an FYI, we are guaranteeing that you will save money on college by working with ECP. This is a guarantee that you will pay less. Book a free consultation at elitecollegiateplanning.com. Hey everybody, welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your host, Dave Kozak, alongside my co-host, Mr. Joe Kearns.
Dave, excited to be here today, sir.
Joe, did you know that the federal government is not the only source of financial aid out there?
I did know that.
Good. And I hope our listeners do too, because today we have the distinguished pleasure of interviewing Fran from FAFSA, and that acronym stands for the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. Fran, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here. So,
number one, right? We're very familiar with FAFSA because we live in Pennsylvania and we help families all across the country, but our primary is in Pennsylvania and the surrounding states. So FAFSA is Pennsylvania's essential Department of Education for assistance as it comes to the same thing you would look at like the FAFSA and the Department of Education. FAFSA represents that at the state level, right?
Yes, we administer the Pennsylvania State Grant Program at FAFSA.
So for everyone, we love grants. Why? Because they're green money, not red money, right? So a lot of times it's money you do not have to repay. It's for support in achieving your higher education goals. So Fran, give us a little background first of how you got to FAFSA, what roles you've had at different institutions and what you're doing today.
Okay. So it kind of was an accident to get into financial aid. I worked in the LaSalle, it was college at the time, financial aid office, and was able to get my degree at night by working there.
Yep.
So then I got promoted within the financial aid office. When I wound up graduating, I left to go to Bucks County Community College and wound up being the director of financial aid there for probably 20 years.
Okay.
Worked with FAFSA very closely in that role. So when a job came up where it was called a regional manager at the time, where we would go out to post-secondary schools and assist them with our systems and things like that, I jumped at the opportunity to do something a little different, although I did like working at the colleges. But so I took that job, and then that kind of morphed into not only post-secondary schools. I deal a lot now with high schools and families, helping them complete the FAFSA, doing financial aid nights to help them understand how to apply for aid. So it's great. I've been there 18 years.
Got it. So you have a very good knowledge of the financial aid system, right?
Pretty good, yeah.
How messed up is it really right now?
It's a little bit of a mess. I think things are getting better, but this has been a really rough year because of the FAFSA simplification, both for students and families filling out the FAFSA, and then for the colleges receiving the data, because everything's been so delayed and, with different technical issues going on. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah, and we've talked on the podcast over the last several months about what really has occurred, and our understanding, and just like your confirmation, that the situation now is not necessarily the information from the families, but it's the distribution to the colleges and the ability for the colleges to make their decisions, which I'm sure has a trickle-down effect to FAFSA, right?
Yeah, well, schools received the result of the FAFSA is called ISAR data, so schools received that later than they would have, and then there were some issues with the data they received that had to be corrected. So yes, they were under the gun to get people packaged, and a lot of schools delayed their May 1st deadline because, to help the students out. So I feel like schools have been pretty flexible, but not only that they got the data late. Now if somebody needs a correction, they have to do it one by one. Well, the correction process itself was delayed, but now it's kind of a one-on-one or one by one. They can't do it in batch process, so they're kind of doing more manual work just to get the kids, financial aid processed. As far as FAFSA, we also went onto a new platform this year, so we got the data late, so our testing began late, so it kind of was a trickle-down effect, so we're trying to catch up from that as well. So,
were there any major sort of acknowledgments that were made from like awards? Were they different than they typically are? Did it affect families to the extent they're number one? Well, we know it affected decision making just because the financial aid is such a huge component of making a good decision in the higher ed. Was there a difference in the actual awards that were granted to people, or the packages?
I think more students were eligible for the federal Pell Grant program because of the change to the needs analysis that sits behind the FAFSA. So that's a good thing. As far as institutional aid, I really couldn't tell you that because I'm not in the colleges, but I know the delay and students waiting changed the decision on the student because, like you said, if they didn't know if they had enough to pay, they might have said, well, I'm going somewhere else just because I know I can afford that, or maybe I'm not going at all and holding off and going in a future semester. So that's what I think a lot of people are afraid of, that somebody might have just, dropped out of the whole system.
Have you seen that trend over the last 4 years, right? But we can go back to COVID, and that was a tough draw for anybody going to college at that point. We had a lot of people that expressed a gap year desire or a let's wait and see kind of thing. Have you guys experienced at FAFSA a trend in that direction?
As far as students applying for Pennsylvania state
applications, things like that?
Applications I think have gone down in general just because of the availability of that college-age student. And like you said, COVID, it's kind of like COVID, then FAFSA simplification. It's kind of a perfect storm. So and I'm trying to think, is it 2025 where they call it the cliff, where there's going to be less high school students? So
there's
I
definitely
think everybody's
a cliff.
in the same boat.
The statistics are out there that we have less college age students, number one, but then there's also this big, I don't know if it's a rumor or if it's a trend where is college worth it becomes a question we hear a lot. Any insight on that? Do you guys receive that? Or is it obviously for families there's a financial decision in this at some point. And so that return on investment becomes a really big question mark for people.
Yeah, and we do talk about that when we do financial aid nights. And students do say, there are a lot more students saying, is it worth it? Now, we also show them that statistically or, historically, the higher education you get, the more money you're going to earn over your lifetime, the less likely you will be to become unemployed. We also tell students, because we not only do financial aid, but we help with career planning and stuff. So we say, the traditional college, four-year college isn't for everybody. You may want to go into the trades or whatever, and there's definitely a need for that too. Sure. So don't feel like this is your only path. So we try to say, what are you interested in? What can you afford? So there's a lot of different avenues for them. But it's...
So FAFSA has, is that like a consulting arm? Is that like how do you get to the advice to a family? So
all of our services and publications and our online help, it's all free because we, part of FAFSA is we have a public service mission. So that's kind of how my job's funded because I'm going out helping families. We do presentations in classrooms. So that's sometimes how we get to the students themselves to say, hey, here's how you start looking for a career. Or we talk to them about smart borrowing at a maybe middle school age to say, if you want to go to this school and it costs this much money and your family has this much saved, this is probably what you're looking at in a loan. And then on the other end, this is what you want to do. Maybe be an accountant in the Philadelphia area. Here's probably what you'll make. Does that make sense? Or should you rethink? So I'm probably getting too much into the weeds. But
no, that's awesome.
We do all that kind of, we call it Education Planner. We have a website. We also help them think about, how to get into colleges. So we work with students directly, we work with families directly, we work with a lot of high school guidance counselors and community agencies. Libraries are a big, they're really helpful to students. And then we work with the post-secondary schools. So we're kind of all over the place. Whoever asks us to do a presentation. Also, we work with the Pennsylvania legislators.
Okay.
So we'll do events with them because they want their constituents to know about financial aid, or they're having an event and they want us to have a table there so we can give them all our publications and talk about how they can afford college.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think when I first got into this industry, it was just the misconceptions and assumptions that surround financial aid and what colleges may cost. I joke with families all the time now and say the only time you actually will know what a school is going to cost you is after you applied, filled out financial aid, get an award, potentially appeal it. Now you know what that school actually is going to cost, right? That's when you know if a school truly is that financial fit. And I think way too often people just immediately say part of the reason college isn't worth it is because it's too expensive. Well, yes, the cost of college has gone up, but the amount of aid that schools give has also gone up. So, I think one of the big misconceptions that I've seen across the board is just trying to overcome some of the noise that's out there. Mm-hmm. And if you guys are doing that even at the middle school age, that's fantastic, right? To kind of let people know that there is help that's available, and it may not be what everything has always been. What you're hearing of on the news that, oh, college, we just hit six figures, right? We're at $100,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not exactly what everyone's going to actually have to pay. Right. So I think peeling back the layers and understanding financial aid and the myths and the, overcoming assumptions that you think, and having experts, no matter where they're coming from, give guidance is always great. So love that that's what we're trying to do here in PA. It's good to hear.
Well, it's what we're trying to do with this podcast,
too. True, yeah.
Right? I mean, the whole concept here is like let's tell it how it is. From the FAFSA simplification became the FAFSA complication. It is a simpler form, right? There's no question that the information disclosed by the family is less.
Yes.
Does that present its own problem in higher ed in its own right? Right, some of these schools, I mean, we have the CSS profile, which is a whole different conversation we get into. But when you take away the information that a family or that a school was receiving, does it make it, what kind of change has to happen in the institution to now complete their offers or their packaging, right?
And not a lot of information that they've used in the past was taken away because they're getting all of most of the income information. Some of it they're not collecting anymore. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that show up on the tax return. But they're getting the federal tax information and automatically through that FAFSA process, which is great. They are collecting asset information. In some cases, they aren't. If a family meets a certain criteria and they say it's not going to make a difference, they're not asking for the asset. So they're getting that. I haven't seen too many schools, or a lot of my schools have said, I'm going to have to introduce an additional form because I'm not getting this. So far, I haven't seen that too much. There are schools that have always used the CSS profile, and I know the CSS profile did I think it's called a light form this year, just because I think they were afraid people weren't going to get the FAFSA information. So I don't know the numbers of how many people use that. But I think I really haven't seen, many of my schools have not introduced any additional forms. And actually, to determine eligibility for federal aid, you're not allowed to ask for anything additional to create a barrier. So
correct. Yeah. Do you see a trend coming where we're going into our second year. It's assumed at this point, I assume your assumption is the same as ours, that it's going to be messed up. They've already said they're going to delay it, right? Do you feel like an institution 2 years into a mess are just they're going to move towards a privatized form like the CSS profile?
I'm not sure, but it's funny. One of my colleagues that does the same job I do said that one of their schools just said they'll probably consider using that light form just so they, I guess, get the data earlier. So that might be something they do for this year to hold them over. As far as the delay, from what I understand, unless you've heard something different, there will be a delay, but on October 1st, they're going to test with some students and schools. I don't know how they're going to go about that, and then kind of increase, I guess, the population they're testing with. But everybody should be able to fill out the FAFSA by December 1st. I actually, in my opinion, think it's a good idea they're delaying because I'm hoping that they're fixing problems, that instead of just saying, we're just getting it out there October 1st and then have all kinds of problems. I just feel like it's better to hopefully get a lot of them fixed because there's still a lot hanging out from this year. So I don't know. I don't know if everybody would agree with that, but hopefully that's the way it will go down.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm reminded of the 2016 change that changed from as of 2018, the date went from January 1 back to October, right? And then all of a sudden, we fast forward to the FAFSA simplification that was in a giant spending bill, right? And we're sort of now we're 2 years in a row, we've sort of been pushed back to that. Last year, I assume that it's not going to be the same as last year when it just crashed, right? And they had to continue to delay, and then the schools had to delay their awards. I mean, this has a trickle-down effect for current students, though, too, right? So if the freshman dates are pushed back or there's delays and then they don't get to their renewals, sort of everybody sort of is left hanging in the wind on that stuff.
Yeah, definitely affect renewals as well. I am hoping, like you, that it's not going to be as bad as last year. I'm hoping that a lot of the fixes will be in. One of the things, and you probably know this, that the federal student aid did was they would list alerts. Here's things that we know are not working. Here's the workaround, or there is no workaround. And as they fix them, they would say, this is fixed, that's fixed. Yeah. And as we went out and did, we also do in-person FAFSA completions a lot of times with high schools. So it was interesting because every night you'd be like, oh, I didn't know that was an issue. And it just hadn't been on the alert yet because nobody knew it was an issue. But so it made it kind of frustrating because I used to come out of there feeling like, oh, I helped all these people.
Yep.
And then I'd feel like, oh, I helped a few. But everybody was really understanding, I have to say. But it was just, I guess it's just me. I felt like, how many people did I really help? Because some of them I'm like, and then I would say, well, you're in this situation, you're going to have to call that 1-800 number. And nobody was getting through or they were getting hung up on. From what I understand, that's getting better. But that was frustrating too because there was no help. So
the one conundrum I see us facing is in this scaled rollout, right? How do you select what schools and what people? And then how do you mitigate the absolute barrage of calls? Because that's what happens is all of a sudden you got 1 million people going in and trying to fill this thing out and everybody's hitting errors. Then everybody makes a phone call and it just overloads the switchboard, for lack of a better expression. Is there any rhyme or reason to how they're going to roll out that piece?
They haven't said yet. They just said, they're going. I'm interested to know that too, because as I said, we do FAFSA completions and I already had a whole bunch set up for October. So I contacted all those counselors and said, I don't think we want to have this because I don't know who they're going to be testing with. So you don't want to get in there and not be able to do anything. So I don't know how they're going to pick the schools and the students to work with. So I can't answer that question.
Interesting.
Sorry.
We do a ton of financial aid nights as well. And I felt the same way last year. I'm in front of a room telling them this is how it worked. Right. Here's the expected result of how it is going to work. But because part of our previous operation was helping people, assisting them, doing the form for them in some instances, we always found that the first 2 weeks was always a mess of FAFSA anyway. Overload the system, it crashed, you had to go back in, stuff like that. So we sort of prepped everybody that we talked to, like, hey, it's going to be a bumpy ride. They're going to sort it out over time. We just didn't realize that the time was going to be almost April until it got sorted. I'm hopeful this year that the time is condensed. I haven't seen any studies yet, but I'm very interested in the shifting of need-based aid that occurred from 2023 to 2024. Just because it has to be. I know from our standpoint, when we would support in appealing financial aid awards that were not appropriate for what the school historically gave, the answer was like, we'd love to give you the right one, but we basically divided everything up and said go because we had to fill our freshman enrollment, right? They're under the gun to fill the beds in the schools, right?
Yeah. I know there were some schools that gave just an amount. This is what you'll get, and they were going to figure out the mix later once the federal and state came in. And I don't know how they did that, and hopefully it all worked out. But like you said, they needed to tell the students something, so they could say, "Okay, if I get this, I'm good to go."
Well, and especially if you look at the bigger business of higher ed right now, right, there is a declining enrollment in colleges because there's a declining population of people eligible to be educated. And so when you have this declining demand, right, you have a situation where the competition now is getting more fierce to gain the students. And so without the information that they're used to receiving, there is this effect that, you're seeing schools close. You're seeing schools no longer in existence. Right. You're seeing mergers and acquisitions in higher ed, which is wild because, we always say, and you may hate this statement or not, but they're the most profitable non-for-profit institutions in the world, right? They have massive endowments that they manage. They have all this money, and when you don't know who can come, and you don't have the finances, you delay your gifting. It throws a monkey wrench into the entirety of their business operation. The point I was making was that throughout the 80s, chemical corporations were buying up others. And we saw it happen in the early 1900s when the Standard Oil Company was, it had to disband into 38 different companies. They bought up and they sold off, right? And so you get this conglomeration, and then you get the sell-off of different pieces of it. And so now I'm looking at this, the higher ed is going through this consolidation, which I see as an opportunity for new types of institutions to evolve and come out of this. But the business end is real. They have to manage huge cash flow amounts. They have to manage the pay for staffs, the upkeep of buildings, and all that stuff. It's not some whimsical world that they live in that's different than any business operation. You got your bottom line's got to be okay, right?
Right.
So it's going to be an interesting time over the next decade, I think, to watch the declining amount of people going and how the schools pivot and operate in there.
Mm-hmm. On some of the expected delays, I do think my hope is that it is that December 1st everybody's able to file. And one of the shining lights at the end of it is they actually did release the formula in August, and that's typically when they would release it. Last year, it actually officially was not released until March, and that was worrisome.
Yeah.
So we do actually have the student aid index calculator, the formula, the up-to-date numbers with inflation adjusted. They're correct this time around. That was another big mistake that they made last year. So I am pretty hopeful. It seems like they are
cautiously optimistic.
Yes, I am. But they are definitely further ahead at this point this year than they were last year. So I think that there are, hopefully, some good things as far as the being able to submit. I won't say necessarily best things about some of the formula changes, but that's here or there.
I was surprised when I saw that came out for 25-26, but excited.
Yeah,
I thought the same thing. That's a good sign.
Yeah. I think the one question that especially all of our listeners in Pennsylvania. So as far as how FAFSA essentially does award some money, right? My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you complete the FAFSA.
Yes.
Once the FAFSA is completed, throughout your senior year of high school, there's a FAFSA application that you can select one school. You can change that school up to a deadline. And is that basically the only application that has to be done?
There's a state grant form. Mm-hmm. So after you complete the FAFSA, and it's new this year. Okay. There used to be a link right from the FAFSA to go to the state grant form. So that's not happening anymore. Department of Ed couldn't get that into play. And there was only maybe 7 states that did that, but it was great because they could just do everything in one sitting.
Submit, click, and then done. Yeah.
So what we're doing is when we receive the ISARs, we are inviting the students to come out and create an account with us and then complete their state grant form, the process, because it's 2 forms. It's a state grant form and it's called a high school form. So once they complete that, we have that application completed. We have the FAFSA information. We pull over that first school that they listed, which answers your question. So we're awarding based on the cost of whatever first school they listed on the FAFSA. They can change that with us really at any time. I mean, we have a state grant deadline, which is normally May 1st, but this year we pushed it back to June 1st to help students that were having problems with the FAFSA. We also have an August 1st deadline for first-time students that are going to specific institutions. For example, community college, business, trade, and technical schools, and some other institutions. But once we get the FAFSA, we haven't started putting out awards yet. We have an estimator, so schools could estimate what the student would get.
Right.
But we tell them what they're eligible based on the cost of that first school.
Okay.
If they say, hey, I thought I was going to Westchester, now I'm going to the community college, the costs are very different, they let us know and we recalculate their state grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how that process works.
We want to help. Send your questions to info@collegeknowledge.net. These can be about college, finances, careers, and anything else you have questions on.
As a point of clarification for the listening audience, who is eligible for a FEAA grant? Not necessarily, but people's, schools, the whole thing. Tell us how that works.
Well, I must first say Pennsylvania state grant only because we have to always tell our schools don't list it as FEAA because we only administer it. The Pennsylvania Legislature General Assembly gives us money every year and we divvy that up with, knowing what the calculation is behind the scenes. So you have to show financial need. It's going to be different this year because the needs analysis was different. So we're looking at that. And so it's kind of all, I don't know how many more people will get it or less. There was that change in the needs analysis where they used to look at multiple children in college at the same time. That's no longer part of the needs analysis.
Absolutely criminal.
So that will reflect, I'm sure, in their state grant. Now, I know within the needs analysis, they also did some things like increase the income protection allowances. So that'll help a little bit. But basically, you have to show financial need. I wouldn't be able to say to you today, if you make this much, you're not eligible.
Yeah.
But, and the assets do come into play if you were required to list the assets. So it's usually, a lot of times I'll get a student that says, I know I'm not eligible for the federal Pell Grant, so I know I'm not getting FEAA. And that's not always the case.
Okay.
Sometimes you can get a state grant even though you weren't eligible for the and then there's other eligibility criteria. You have to be Pennsylvania. You have to meet our domicile. And then the schools have to do all kinds of eligibility checks to make sure they're making progress and all those things. So,
And it is Pennsylvania students for Pennsylvania schools.
yes, we do have, there's about 6 states where we have reciprocal agreements where a student can take a Pennsylvania state grant to those states, but it's at a reduced amount. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
What are those 6 states?
Oh, I know you were going to ask me that. Okay,
Just
hope.
because that's one I
let's
don't know
hope
I don't know the answer to that. I'm curious.
It's Delaware, Vermont, Massachusetts, West Virginia, and who am I missing? Oh, West Virginia, D.C. I'm missing one, but it'll come to me.
Virginia?
No,
It's not Jersey, right?
nope, no New York and Jersey. I get that question all the time. Why can't I use my? Can't do it. And I always say that at a financial aid night. If this may help make your decision where they attend. Ohio, that's the other state.
Got it.
Well, that's a good one.
Yeah. So,
know
because sometimes parents are like, we're down to this and this. And I said, well, maybe when you see if they're getting a substantial Pennsylvania state grant, they may decide to stay in Pennsylvania rather than go to wherever that we don't let you take your state grant to.
Any advice from a timeline perspective? I mean, we always, tell our students earlier is better. Earlier doesn't necessarily mean if it opens October 1st, get it done October 1st, right? There's schools have priority deadlines. If you're doing early action, early decision, like you want to make sure things are in all, but prior to that, I've kind of given the blanket saying if you're doing regular decision, make sure by Thanksgiving everything's done. That's usually where I look at. But is there any difference between, is if you complete the FAFSA, you complete everything, but then you're late to doing this Pennsylvania state application? Is there any downside to that, or is it really just make sure it gets done?
As long as they complete the FAFSA by our deadline, which for most students is May 1st, they can do that state grant form really until the following April. They don't want to do that because they won't know what they're getting and the money won't go to the school. So we have been trying to make students aware of that because a lot of students were really nervous about that state grant form because they were saying, because we we didn't invite the students till late because we didn't have their data.
Sure.
So they're saying, well, I'm not going to be on time. We were saying, you're good as long as you got your FAFSA done. You can do that state grant form. So, but of course we want them to get it in as soon as possible so they have the money to pay the school.
Yeah.
Now, it's not an unlimited amount of grant money, right? So you guys have to divvy it up based on applications, right?
Right.
So do you receive all applications and then determine what goes out, or is there criteria that is hit and it's starting to be doled out? We
have that deadline of May 1st. In a normal year, we have our board meets and says, okay, this is the award formula for this year.
Okay.
And we can do a lot of projections and stuff. And a lot of that was kind of really delayed and kind of done the best we could. But, it was just a hard year to get all that done. So we have the deadline. If somebody meets the criteria that applied by the deadline, they will get a state grant.
Okay.
I think I only remember this happened in twice where we had extra money and we extended the deadline, but I don't know that would happen. And as I said, we did extend the deadline to June 1st. But we do divvy it up amongst the students, and they actually can get it whether they're full-time or at least half-time.
Okay.
So that's kind of nice, too.
And public and private institutions alike, you can use state grant money?
Yeah.
Awesome.
There are some institutions in Pennsylvania that aren't eligible. Their program of study isn't eligible, and you have to be in at least a 2-year program of study. So sometimes there's, just a 1-year certificate.
Or like an 18-month program
you're
that
not
doesn't.
getting a Pennsylvania state grant.
Yeah.
How much money is
Can they
awarded?
get?
Is it a standard? Like, does the legislature say you guys get $50 million?
You mean, well, every year it's part of the budget process.
Got it. So it's got to go through, and we say, and so some
Right.
years it could be higher, some years it could be
Yes.
lower, depending on what else they're trying to do.
Yes.
But it all comes out of what would be the state education budget. Is that accurate?
I don't know what line item it comes out
Okay.
of, but they say to us, this is what you have. And for past, I don't know how many years, FAFSA has been able to also contribute some money towards that.
Okay.
So this year, with the total of what we have, we're saying that the maximum a student could get would be $57.50, which was the maximum for last year, and we were really trying to keep that maximum. But they could get less than that based on the cost of school that they're attending and their financial need, but that would be the max. So if somebody went to one of the highest cost institutions in Pennsylvania and they had the highest need, they could get a $57.50 as a full-time student.
Okay. And what is the highest cost institution in Pennsylvania?
I don't know. I know some of them are up there, but I don't know what the highest
My alma
cost
mater
is.
right there. F&M is.
F&M, yeah.
I think it's Penn.
I think
it's UPenn.
What did they hit this year?
I believe last year they were at 94,000 cost of attendance, all in around there.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure.
We had the new numbers, but it didn't populate prop, so we pulled it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know UPenn does say that it meets full need, though.
Yeah,
so
they do.
If you can get in and you
That's
have
it.
need, that and how they determine that, because they use the profile too, is
Well, and it's funny that it's not funny. It's awesome that you said it, because that's one of those misnomers out there that people just. It's almost like it just eludes people that if you and here's the other thing. Let me finish my first thought. You got me racing now. If a school meets need, it is going to give you the money that you are. If it meets 100% of need, it's going to give you the money that you need to make it work based on the SAI and all the calculations go into it, whether it's institutional methodology in the CSS profile or the federal methodology in the FAFSA. I've sat with probably 20,000 families over the course of my career. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe 5,000. I'm just trying to think how many I sit with a year. Either way, it's been a lot of families. And everybody's like, well, we're not going to qualify for financial aid. And it doesn't work like that, right? When schools cost $10,000, yeah, you're probably not going to, but when they cost $90,000, like there's not many people that have the cash flow on an annual basis to just write a check for $90,000. It doesn't happen.
Right.
And that's what this whole system is designed to do. And I compare it to the legal system and the tax system, right? They're both systems. You have to know how to navigate the system to get what is arguably owed to you, if you can call it owed, or what you deserve in it. But you also have to make a strategic choice on the school, right? If you have a school that meets, 20% of need and you have a high need, that's not going to be a fit for a family. And so I did a white paper on this probably 3 or 4 years ago, and it was the 5 keys to understanding financial aid system. And the first key that I talk about is knowing your numbers as a family, but then knowing the school's numbers, right? How do they give out their awards? How much can they afford to give out? Because it's such a critical thing for families. I mean, it's a massive financial decision. And I think too many people go into it whimsically, and you can easily throw off either your retirement or your child's launch into their professional career, right? You graduate with $100,000 of debt and you make $50,000 a year. What's the equivalent starting salary, Joe?
You're around $25,000,
right? Because you got to service that debt first before you even get going. So,
there's 2 biggest mistakes when it comes to financial aid or filling out a net price calculator, FAFSA CSS profile. Is one, what's the amount of your investments? And people include their 401k, their IRAs, right? And then when they go to the assets of the kids, they say, "Oh, my kid has a 529." No, they don't. The parent has a 529 that the student is the beneficiary for. Okay. And if you just make those 2 mistakes, it might be University of Pennsylvania, you're paying full price on their net price calculator. So knowing your numbers is great. Knowing the school's numbers is great. But knowing how to apply your numbers the proper way will give you the right answer. I know we joke about it's one of those situations. If garbage goes in, garbage comes out. You're not going to get the right answer. You're going to miss on things. So accuracy and understanding how a question is, the proper answer to those questions will give you the potential. This is what a school costs. So don't just assume, I went on the net price calculator. It says I'm not getting anything. Well, if you answered a question wrong, you might actually be entitled to $40,000 a year, So, and I've seen that.
Well, and there's 2 things to keep in mind. The retirement does not count, but when you go to the CSS profile, it is certainly disclosed. So there's different, like you do not disclose it on the FAFSA. You will be asked to disclose it on the CSS profile. But just because you're asked to disclose something does not mean that it counts against you. People go crazy over that, where they think, if I have to tell them this, it's not, right? But you're talking about a couple of things here, and this for the listening audience. The FAFSA is a federal financial form, right? You got to fill it out accurately. You can't cut corners on it because there is recourse. The FEAA is a state form, right? Same rules apply. CSS profile is the privatized version of both of those forms, right? It'd be like you go to your credit union, you fill out their application and expect M&T Bank to give you a loan. No, like some of these are specific to the institution. And there are institutions that have their own forms as well.
If schools go through a year without essentially hiccups in the FAFSA submission, and they realize that the offers that they're making is not getting the commitments that they need, if they're not filling the bet, that's when I think when there's a business, a line item, whether it's too much money given out or they didn't get enough students coming in, if they're missing the mark than what they were pre-FAFSA Simplification Act, that's when I think schools will pull the trigger. I know that there were some schools, not in PA, that went own form last year. I know there was 2 or 3 that said, hey, because of the FAFSA delay, we are requesting that you do this. I know CSS Profile College Board was kind of testing that light with about 5 or 6 different schools last year in preparation of saying, well, we now have this other opportunity. If you feel like you're being missed, it's there. So they were trying to get ahead of the game. But I think after this year, we'll definitely see a little bit more, but then I think a year after, if we have one good year where there's no hiccups, I think schools will then determine, well, if this is what it's going to be moving forward,
we can or can't use it.
Yeah, I think that's, what's going to happen. But that's a guess.
It's a hypothesis. It's an educated guess. Okay, so 2 things I wanted to ask. Okay. First is the targeted industry program. Does it still exist in Pennsylvania?
PA tip? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, it does.
What are the targeted industries right now?
Oh, They added a bunch. There's like some manufacturing. There's a lot of health. I don't know all of them. And actually, there might be some more coming down the line. So and they are the shorter programs. When I talked about Pennsylvania State Grant, you have to be in a 2-year program of study. To be eligible for PA TIP, you can't be in a 2-year program of study. It has to be shorter than that. So I think when this all started, they were saying for these students that aren't eligible for Pennsylvania State Grant, what can we do for, industries in Pennsylvania that they need, So they kind of revise that list all the time based on the needs of Pennsylvania. That's why I don't know the whole list. I should have brought a brochure with me. But that's really helped a lot of students, and schools really appreciate that money.
Is there a limit to the tip, to what you get through the PA TIP program?
I forget what it was last year. It used to be equal to the maximum of the Pennsylvania State Grant, but that wasn't the case last year. But I want to say around 5,000. I mean, it's similar.
And then this is going to be controversial.
Uh-oh.
The PA 529 program.
Okay.
Do you guys work with it at all? Does it come across your world?
Well, what happens, how we look at that is if somebody lists, as you said, they have a 529 for their students, so it's an asset of the parent. When they get to the state grant form, that's one of the questions we ask. Did you supply an amount for PA 529 as part of your assets? If you did, what is that amount? We deduct that for Pennsylvania state grant purposes. So it's kind of an advantage. If it's a 529 in another state, we don't do that. So that's how we look at that.
And when you say you deduct it, do you mean it's deducted from the financial picture? So
Yes.
it's like, hey, if I have $50,000 in a 529, that makes I don't get as much from a grant, or I'm not eligible. But if it's Pennsylvania, that is now gone from the equation, so you might qualify?
Yes. We take it out. We don't look at it at all.
Very interesting.
So that's, people ask us, why do you have the state grant form? There's just a few things we have to get that we can't get
from the FAFSA.
Through the FAFSA, and that's an advantage to the family.
And the PA 529, that counts for both the guaranteed savings plan and the investment
Yes.
strategies, both the same? Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
And does any of the excess capital that is in the credit-based PA 529 come back to FEA to dole out to others?
We don't get any money from 529.
Okay.
I don't know. We don't.
God, that would be the right thing to do, wouldn't it?
You
Yeah.
would think. But
I don't really know about the excess capital, so
it's
I'm.
I won't get heavily into it.
Yeah.
But you buy credits at today's value for tomorrow. Well, there is excess growth, and the reality that the credit didn't increase, the tuition didn't increase that much. The room and board did, everything else did, but the tuition didn't. And so you bought it at today's value, and the value stayed relatively current. Well, there's an excess in that. And so we've been critics of that excess and we tell people don't buy the credit one because that you may not get the value of that credit. Whereas if you buy the market-based security, you're getting, whatever the market return is. But that excess, I'm still trying to understand where it goes.
Yeah, I
But
never thought
the
about
right
that or
thing
wasn't aware
to
of
do
that.
would be, and if you're listening, PA, send it back to FEA so they can dole out more money to families in Pennsylvania, right?
Can potentially raise the annual grant each year, right? Maybe more families can
I should
qualify
be
for
in
it.
politics.
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Jeez.
I don't
Yeah,
think
I
you
would
want to do
love
that.
to. I would love
do
to
not
see
at
that.
all. Nope.
I had 529s for both of my daughters, and I have to say that was really helpful. Just putting in a plug for the program itself, that was great. Just saving, a little bit each year, it really came in handy. So.
So, any advice to students and families this year in terms of what they should be doing FAFSA-wise, FEA-wise? Like, where's the best place to pay attention to? Where do they got to be plugged into, right? One of the things we tell people is you don't have to understand this whole thing, but while you're in it, you better pay attention to what's coming out. Where's the best place for them to get information?
So, if they're in high school, the guidance office usually has good information. We at FEA, we do a lot of webinars online. We do podcasts. So we do a lot of stuff on social media. but a lot of information. Here's what's coming. This is when the FAFSA is out. This is state grant form. So there are two good sources, but I think the students, the high school guidance counselors, are really good at disseminating information. And the renewal students usually get their information from whatever
from
college
the-
they're applying to. So, and I know that I've been seeing on Instagram, I keep getting things about, you might be eligible for the federal Pell Grant. So they're starting to do things on social media too. Maybe they always were and I wasn't getting it, but I've been seeing that a lot lately. So it seems like they're trying to, make students aware.
I first saw it. I first saw them really pick it up when the loan forgiveness was a big.
Yeah.
They really started promoting, the consolidation, the potential debt forgiveness, and then when FAFSA, new Simplification Act came out, they were kind of doing a lot of updates with that. They scaled it back because it wasn't so positively received. So I know that the Department of Education had a lot of social media, I'll say, presence with the loan forgiveness, but now it seems like they want to continue to push that. Mm-hmm. Again, it's it's a place where it can give, I would say, reminders, but I think that they're, the guidance counselors, FAFSA, College Planning Network, there's plenty of people that will provide, kind of read between the lines on this, understand, not just fill it out, but fill it out accurately. Don't be delayed, no deadlines. There's a lot more to it than what they kind of post on there. It's pretty generic that I've seen, but yeah. It's
and if people want to understand the programs that you guys have to offer, FAFSA, and the distribution of the state grant, did I say it right that time?
Yes.
Where do families go?
FAFSA.org.
FAFSA.
We have information all about the state grant program, any other special programs that we administer on behalf of the state or some on behalf of the federal government. Mm-hmm. It's all listed there. All the eligibility requirements, application, all deadlines, things like that. So we have
I have one final question.
Can I go first real quick?
Yeah.
Because yours, we'll wrap up with yours because yours will be good. Because mine's pretty short. I know there's the Pennsylvania State Grant. We talked briefly about the TIP program. I also know there's the PA Forward loan that I know some of my families have gotten a better loan opportunity through that than some other private sources. Outside of those, are there any other programs that families in Pennsylvania should know about, that there's some assistance with potentially paying for college? Is there anything else that...
Yeah, if you look on our website and go to the other educational programs, there's all kinds of things. Just to give you a few, there's one called PHEAA, and it's really federal money, but we administer it in Pennsylvania. But that's for students that aging out of foster care. There's an additional, if they meet certain criteria, they can get some additional money, which is great because, that really helps. And it's grant money. It doesn't have to be repaid. There's blind and or deaf grant. So there's a $500 grant for students that have a hearing or vision impairment. There's something called RTSS, Ready to Succeed. That's probably a couple years old, but that's... if you're not eligible for state grant or only eligible for a certain amount, students are sometimes eligible for this RTSS if the family's under a certain income level and the student has to have a certain GPA. So it's kind of nice that, somebody that just misses the state grant cutoff because of the income or whatever can get some funds. So
and that's on academic performance?
Well, they have to
to
have a certain GPA, and they're changing it this year, and I'm not sure what they're changing it to. They're bringing it down a little, so more people will be eligible. But that we figure out. We figure out who meets that criteria, and you have to also be a sophomore, so you don't get it as incoming freshman, but after you've completed your freshman year. So we figure out who meets the financial criteria, and then we send those names to the schools and say, did they meet the academic criteria, and then they can get the money. So that's been nice.
So that's an in-service type thing. I mean, not in-service. You're already at that school. Your freshman performance indicates more money available for sophomore, potentially junior and senior year.
Yes.
That's awesome.
So
I did not know that.
It is need-based as well, but it's a little more lenient than just the straightforward Pennsylvania State Grant. Nice. So just check on the website, and we're always getting new programs that we administer. So there's a lot on there.
And then lastly, because is there separate applications that have to go for those other programs?
Yeah, I mean, some you don't have to do an application like the RTSS. We have the FAFSA. We don't need anything additional. But the PHEAA, the first time you apply for it, you would do an application. the blind and or deaf, you need an application. And it will tell you right on the website what you
Okay.
need to do, when you need to do it by.
Okay.
And the
Good to know.
PA Forward, that's separate. That's our loan area.
Yeah.
But if you go into FEAA.org/PA Forward, you can find out about the private loan. And sometimes you're right. If you can get a better rate than
It's one to shop.
so-
is essentially
yeah,
what,
it's
what
one
I
of
look
the many private loans out there.
And that is private to PA residents only?
Well, PA residents can use it to in Pennsylvania, or if they're going out of state. We also allow our border states to use it if you're coming to school in Pennsylvania, and they're just adding a couple more states where you'll be able to use it, but you'll get a little bit of a higher interest rate. So it's kind of expanding.
Interesting.
But it's been very popular and growing every year, which is great for people just need that little extra money.
One last one. Sorry. Seriously. Sorry, I know I'm the worst. I'm the absolute worst. The one
You
thing
said one.
I know. I'm so sorry, but
That's
it's
okay.
as we're talking.
That's okay.
It's
Thinking
'cause
of more things.
And this again, simple one, because I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this. But our listeners, it's the question I get asked by more families that are renewing than anything else. I didn't get anything from the state grant program last year. Should I even bother filling it out this year?
Well, they would fill out the FAFSA
Yep.
because something might have changed in their family situation. And then if they have their state grant form on file from the prior year, we'll use that to determine, are they eligible? So I always say yes, it's free to file.
Yep.
And then see, because like I said, something could have changed. Also, students that filled out the FAFSA may have a change during that year. You may have a reduction in income. Somebody gets laid off. So you always want to let your financial aid officer know that, and FEA, because they will sometimes look at that and use their professional judgment, and you may
Yeah.
be eligible for something additional.
Great.
Awesome.
I'm done.
All right. The only thing I want to touch on is it's the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. Do you guys have any clout or interaction with the PA 339 programs that high schools have to run in terms of the guidance and the progressing to the next step? Are you guys engaged in that?
We don't come up with the regulations, but we do as part of our outreach. If you look on our education planner website, we have a lot of publications to meet those requirements.
Okay.
That we can send out to a middle school or a high school if they're doing something, activities and things like that. Also, that's some of the things we do in the classroom. Somebody will say, we know we have to do this. Can you come in and talk about whatever the subject is? And that will meet the requirement. And then we have some forms on our website where they can have the student complete something, and then they have that to say the
this
student
is what
met
we
that
did.
requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So
Okay.
we get involved in that way.
Cool. Any final words, final advice for families getting into this?
It's a ride.
Buckle up. I was going to say buckle up.
That's good. That's good. But don't lose heart, because there's so many people that receive financial aid, and if a school's asking you for additional information, get it in, because you just want to complete the process and see what you're eligible for.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for the interview. It's been awesome information. I think very useful and very practical for everyone. So it's been a pleasure. This has been College Knowledge.
If you didn't know, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Elite Collegiate Planning. Make sure to share and tag us.